Hi, it's Steve Hargadon, and welcome to the closing keynote with Reed Hepler from the Libraries, AI and the Libraries 2 mini conference, more applications, implications, and possibilities. This is an extension of the event that we did in March of 2024. The recordings for this conference and the previous are available at library20.com and at the Library 2.0 page on YouTube. Reed, thanks for being here and welcome.
No problem. Thank you very much for having me. Before I get started, and let me share my screen here. I did have a concurrent session earlier today, and I shared some tools, a list of tools and things. So I'm going to reshare that in the chat right now. Here are the generative AI tools that I shared in that session, and an excellent resource shared by, I believe, Amanda, also during that session. And here we go. A little bit about me. I am the College of Southern Idaho Digital Initiatives Librarian and Archivist. And so I used AI in an educational format, a library environment, also in my personal life. And I go and I also train in businesses. So I have experience with about a lot of different applications of generative AI. Thank you, Roxana, for that comment. Makerspaces, exactly. Makerspaces and AI do have a lot of intersections. And it is interesting to see how policy and how kind of best practices can curb innovation or guide it or restrain it as well. So without any further ado, we'd like to thank Future of AI, of course, for supporting this conference and supporting this session particularly. So the initial educator perspectives and administrator as well perspectives on generative AI that I found at the College of Southern Idaho were fourfold. First, a fear that student use of ChatGPT primarily created new forms of unethical practices. Second, confidence that students wanted to use ChatGPT or generative AI in effective and constructive ways. A fear that generative AI or ChatGPT specifically undermines systems and norms of online learning and learning in general. And fourth, confidence that ChatGPT uses resulted in innovative products and workflows to enhance instructional design, implementation, and assessment. And you may think, well, Reed, aren't you just talking about, fear and confidence? So wouldn't there be two, forms of learning and or of perspectives? And that might be the case for a lot of people, but just because you have confidence in yourself and in the education uh, sector doesn't mean that you have confidence in the students. And so you can be in, camp two, confidence that students wanted to use the ChatGPT in effective and constructive ways also. And you could also be fearful that it undermines education. And so I found out that we needed to talk about how to use generative AI ethically and effectively, and also how we should be training our students to use these tools. And so I came up with this kind of framework, and obviously everyone has their own framework, but this is how I like to frame these topics. The three C's of generative AI. First, copyright. Who owns the rights to these products and how are they created? Second, citation. Which tool is used to create the tool or the product, and if necessary, where did you get your information or the model? And third, circumspection. What hazards, moral, ethical, educational, and otherwise, should users manage when they are utilizing generative AI tools? So the first of these is copyright. Who owns the rights to the product, and what should we do about copyright when we're creating tools and using them? So I have three questions that we all need to kind of think about when we're talking about copyright and generative AI. First, what are the rights and responsibilities of the copyright owners of the original work? Second, what are the rights and responsibilities of the copyright user or the person who is using those items? And third, and perhaps one that will spark the most discussion here, which is generative AI? Is it an owner or a user? Or is it both? Or is it neither? A lot of generative AI tools, of course, they use copyrighted works to create their products. Is AI a creator, or is it primarily a user of works, or through the public domain and the fair use doctrine and a bunch of other exceptions and alternatives? Is it neither? Should we be focusing on the original work creator and the user of the AI tool? For instance, if I use AI and it infringes on someone's copyright or uses their work, Should I be held responsible for that? Or should we try to, focus our efforts on looking at AI as a copyright infringer? So first of all, what exactly is copyright? Copyright is the right that was given to the owner of a work, or the creator of a work, or the custodian of the work, and that person or group holds the title to the intellectual property of a particular work. So it's and a work is a creation that was the result of one or more minds, something that you created and disseminated and gave to other people so they could use it, but not disseminate it, not duplicate it. You have the right to control the duplication of that work and how people adapt it. It's the expression of ideas through any type of media. When someone holds copyright in a work, they have exclusive rights to control duplications, alterations, performance, display, and dissemination of that work, its expressions, and their manifestations. And this includes derivations, which are when you create a movie off of a book, or when you take a book and you make it into a play or something like that. And so the original creator or someone who they've assigned holds the copyright to that work. What can be copyrighted? These are expressions of ideas through any type of media, musical works, sound recordings, audiovisual, images, sculptures, architectural works even can be copyrighted. What cannot be copyrighted? Devices, processes, simple ideas, or even complex ideas, public domain materials, works of government employees, even recipes. And this is something that I found out was really interesting. Recipes cannot be copyrighted, which is why if you go to a recipe book, this may or may not be unethical. You can go and write down the recipe that's in a book, and they can't sue you for copyright infringement because they're copywriting the presentation of that recipe. And that's kind of interesting. If you're using generative AI to come up with a recipe, technically that you can't have any copyright claim on whatever generative AI comes up with because it's a recipe. Works both ways. Now, a few caveats, and feel free also to ask questions. I'm going to have some room for discussion through the chat here, but feel free to use the chat while I'm presenting this. Some caveats on copyright and generative AI. Firstly, our understanding and actions regarding AI and copyright operate within the parameters of existing copyright law. Current copyright law mandates human authorship for protection, and this raises the question, can we consider AI an author under existing copyright law? We must also explore whether the AI system's programmer can claim copyright over the AI-generated works. A lot of people, I mean, we focus on the works whose copyright has been infringed, the creators, and we focus on the copyright of the users. But does the programmer have grounds for copyright protections as well? To navigate this evolving landscape, it is our responsibility to stay informed. I don't have all the answers, and I'm not going to give any clear answers, just guidelines, because I'm not a copyright lawyer. But one thing is clear, that we should always respect and prioritize respecting intellectual property rights when using AI-generated content. And this is where citation comes into play, which we're going to talk about in a bit. Never, the user should never put copyrighted content in prompts unless you hold the copyright to that, of course. Then you can do whatever you want with it. But this could change soon. The ARL and ALA released a joint statement a few months ago that said that training generative AI models on copyrighted works is fair use. And there's a lot of discussion on whether that is in fact the case, but that's their joint statement. And so it could be that it is ruled as fair use. And that would, I mean, I was looking at actually listening to hearings by Senate and House groups, committees on this, and both of them were of the opinion that they were not going to rule it fair use, but who knows what could happen, or put into law. Who knows what the Supreme Court could say. There are multiple bodies of government, at least in the United States, and we'll see what happens there. But as for now, it is not regarded as fair use. I'm going to have a room for a discussion in a bit. So Chris, thank you for your hand. I will call on you, or you can talk, or you can put it in the chat again, and we can talk about this in the chat as well. OpenAI permits the use of AI in its outputs, or excuse me, of its AI outputs, as long as we do not misrepresent them as entirely human work. And then also using AI generated content is and should not be a workaround to avoid due diligence or to disregard others' intellectual property rights. There have been court cases in the U.S. around ChatGPT and its use of copyrighted works. They are still ongoing. The New York Times has had a court case against AI, against OpenAI specifically, and they have said that they have, ferreted out kind of a verbatim reproduction of one of their articles. There are people who have kind of spoken on that and said the only way that they would have done that is to manipulate the AI and give a prompt that is so specific and so direct that no reasonable person would use it. This slide, I can share this slide with you afterward, and this recording will be available on YouTube afterward as well. No, you're good. Thank you, Chris. And so here are examples of copyright AI battles. We have Zarya of the Dawn. We have Theatre de Opera Spéciale. And we have the recent winner of the Adobe, or excuse me, I think it was the Sony Photography Award. All of these were copyrighted works. Yes, yes, they should probably stop doing that. That is a questionable practice. But again, ethics, it all depends on what are your ethics standpoints. So, case in point, what arguments would you make for or against these products? We have Zarya of the Dawn. We have books. Amazon recently had Zarya of the Dawn is what it's called. Amazon has recently placed a 3-book cap on creators because many people are putting things into AI, getting the AI books, and publishing them on Amazon. And so, what arguments would you make for or against the copyrightability of these products? And so we have the fair use doctrine. The fair use doctrine encourages reproduction and other uses of copyrighted works without permission from the copyright owners in order to create non-commercial transformative works, which means that the purpose of those things is not the same as the original work. Education has been the most frequent and noticeable justification for fair use arguments, but it should be noted that the fair use doctrine is not an allowance. It's not something that, you say, oh, I'm using fair use, and then everybody says, okay. It's a justification and argument you make when you're accused of infringing upon copyright. The court determines if the fair use argument is justifiable, not the plaintiff or the defendant. It's the judicial system. So you cannot use fair use as a blanket statement in the beginning. You have to be able to justify and explain your fair use doctrine. Some courts support these arguments and oppose them, but violators are punished with heavy fines. And so this is kind of the factors you consider: the purpose, the nature, the amount of significance, and the effect of the use upon the potential market for the value of the copyrighted work, and then how it affects use in educational and library circumstances. And a work, not a workaround, but alternative works are open access materials. And I would encourage anyone who's training a work to use open access materials. I've created a library science tool and an instructional design assistant on chat.openai.com. And both of these use open access materials and have sources that are openly licensed, and I cite my sources in a link. Open access materials are free to the public with no hidden costs or fees. They can be shared and duplicated, but a lot of them, especially these yellow and red licenses down here, cannot be revised, edited, clarified, or combined. These 5 ones up here can be, because they're public domain and they have more abilities for the user. But open access licenses really kind of open the door for content that can be used in that would be chat.openai.com is ChatGPT's link, and here is my I put it in the chat. Here's my chatbot that I've created, and you can see kind of my model for citing open access materials that I've used. And on that note, do you have any questions about this? Lillian, I see that you've raised your hand. Do you have a question or a comment? Any discussion? not, we can move on to the next section. So non-commercial and non-derivative potentially limit putting them in AI. Non-derivative, yes. Non-derivative, yes. Non-commercial, you can make a tool, but you cannot use it for commercial purposes, or you cannot sell it. So somebody could use it for commercial purposes, but you can't sell the works for commercial purposes. No, you're good. Thank you, Lillian. So citation, next. Which tool was used to create the tool, and if necessary, where did you get your information? Why do we cite? So there's no set standard for citing AI tools, because the purpose of citation is to give information as to where you access the information. Even official suggestions by APA, MLA, and Chicago are just that. They're suggestions because of the constantly changing perceptions of the nature of generative AI. Is it a tool? Is it a creator, etc.? But you should know the AI use and citation policy for the school, class, and/or publication for which you are writing. The ideal citation in any style should include at least the tool name and version, the time and date of usage, the prompt, query, or conversation title, the name of the person who queried the AI. Ways to save conversation records include the Wayback Machine, Internet Archive, AI Archives, which I personally don't recommend, but you can use it if you want to, or ChatGPT or Copilot chat links for text chats only. And I believe also now that Bing AI is also having links. They used to have them and then they took them away, and they might have taken them or put them back on. Lisa asks, how do future users know whether something was created as NC is being used to create the content that they plan to sell? That is a very good question. I have been that is a very good question, and I'm currently working on that. For my purposes, for my AI uses, I only use non-commercial things, and I encourage people to use that tool specifically for non-commercial purposes. And yes, a PDF of the chat would be very useful as well. Thank you very much, Lisa, for bringing that up. That's a very good question. So the title goes in the conversation, and I have a form right here. So this is my personal style that I use in APA. I put my last name, first initial, and OpenAI 2023, and then you have the chat title, conversation with, the tool name, the fact that what it is, a large language model, or if you were to do ideogram, you would say a diffusion model, the version that you use, the date of the generation, and then a link, preferably, to the specific chat. And I know that a lot of people are going to say, why would you put the title? Why would you put the title, or excuse me, why would you put your name on here? And I say, because I queried it. But with the caveat that if you put yourself as the author of something, you had better act like you're the author. You have to do revisions. You have to edit it. You have to rearrange things. You have to use it as a sounding board. So you should put in the effort to make sure that you are at least an editor, if not an author, of the finished work. Again, like we said when we were talking about copyright, AI should not be a workaround for you to get out of work, for someone to get out of work. Any questions about citation aspect? Or about anything like that? We can have questions at the end. And again, excellent questions in the chat. Thank you very much. The third C is circumspection. What hazards should I manage? Thank you very much, Dalben, Book of Three, Lloyd Alexander, one of my favorite books. So there are many ethical issues related to generative AI output. Plagiarism, biases, the fact that it can be arbitrary, repetitive, and it can be selective in its responses. It's occasional, and I should actually probably add frequent incorrectness. If you know how to prompt and know how to manage these things, it can only be incorrect occasionally. But if someone's going for the first time, they won't know how to control for those things. A lack of connection to outside resources, which is being reduced with the custom GPT tools and other things like that. Goody 2 was released as the world's most responsible AI model. It is actually a satirical AI that is meant to be so responsible that it will refuse to answer any question. And so I put, really, there are issues with any type of AI model, even those created for satirical reasons. I would encourage you to try Goody 2. It's really goody2.ai. It's really funny, but it does bring up some interesting ideas. And so these have some implications when you're creating and providing AI tools. Never promise users or individuals who are using your models or customers or patrons that you're trusting with their data when you're putting that into the prompt that you have created a completely secure generative AI tool or model. They are always vulnerable. Yes, they could be relatively isolated, and you could not voluntarily give data to the model creator, but they do not yet come with deliberate and explicit data access control. Even though OpenAI is trying to kind of test that out, I I don't I don't think that it will be a foolproof system. Ensure that your users know the ethical implications of the tool. For example, remind them that in creating prompts, they are responsible for the data they provide to the tool, whether inadvertently or intentionally. And thank you, Kevin, for your comments. A lot of people, yes, do refuse to accept articles that use generative AI. One of the main ethical issues is privacy harms. There are many challenges in the judicial system, and the enforcement of privacy law is significantly impeded by the requirement of harm. Courts often add a harm element even when it's not legislatively required because it's making it difficult to address privacy violations effectively. Privacy law is a patchwork of various legal forms with harm requirements posing a major impediment. The lack of harm recognition leads to the dismissal of cases and allows wrongdoers, in this case AI corporations, to escape accountability. Many privacy violations involved intangible injuries like anxiety or frustration, which courts struggle to recognize and address. And so Danielle Keats and Daniel Solove came up with this excellent privacy harms um, framework, if you will, and it's fantastic. I would encourage you to read the article. I cite it later on in my references page. It is something like 86 pages, so it's very long, very good, I would recommend it highly. It is suggested that harm should not always be required in privacy cases as it may be irrelevant to the lawsuit's purpose. The focus should be on aligning enforcement goals with appropriate remedies. Establishing harm is often a prerequisite for enforcing privacy violations in the judicial system. Courts have added harm requirements in various ways, including through standing and statutory damages, which lead to a narrow conception of cognizable harm. For plaintiffs in federal court specifically, showing harm is a significant hurdle, and most causes of action have harm as one of their elements. So, on that note, OpenAI has very specific terms of use. And an important aspect of the terms of use of OpenAI is that as a product or service user, you essentially own all of the copyright to the output created by your inputs, according to them, I should add. In the words of the document, you may provide input to the services and receive output from the services based on that input, and they are called collectively content. You are responsible for the content, including ensuring that it does not violate any applicable law. You represent and warrant that you have all rights, licenses, and permissions needed to provide input. As between you and OpenAI, and to the extent permitted by applicable law, you retain your ownership rights and input and own the output. And OpenAI assigns to you all their right, title, and interest, if any, in and to the output. The rest of the terms can be read at openai.com. And to have a more privacy-conscious session with ChatGPT, you can use platform.openai.com or opt out through privacy.openai.com/policies and have access to your chat history. Still, even if you don't put your data specifically into the AI tool, it can and will extrapolate data about you. And there are also still privacy concerns. Even despite user best efforts, generative AI tools can extrapolate learning behaviors, engagement patterns, and academic performance. While these data points are helpful for educators and similar data points can be helpful for professionals, there are multiple concerns. Essentially, for every data point you share with generative AI tools that are trained to extrapolate, there are multiple data points that can be inferred. This can be made more precise with every other data point you share in a prompt. The extrapolated profile is increasingly calibrated with every interaction. The process of extrapolation in AI, as it infers information beyond the training data, can inadvertently reveal sensitive personal data. This is particularly concerning in educational settings, where the privacy of student or patron data is paramount. For instance, an AI system might infer a student's learning disabilities or mental health issues based on their interaction patterns, even if such information was not explicitly provided. Thank you, Nicole. Yes, you can also use ChatGPT without logging in. That's a very good process. This extrapolation process, while useful for personalized learning, can also be a gateway for privacy invasion and must be managed with strict data governance protocols. How do you use that? Well, the same principles and practices that we have used for decades to protect our data from malicious and interfering actors are the same ones that will protect us from malicious or negative effects. Previously, we have been worried about people coming across our information or using it by buying it or being handed it from institutions, but now we can deliberately and directly give our private and confidential data to generative AI tools. Or again, they can extrapolate that data. While Sean Falconer laments that there is, quote, no delete button for generative AI tools to forget the data collected by companies, tools, and programs, and I'll cite that in my references page later, the truth is that even with those delete buttons, our data is still being sold and retained. Hence, in some ways, not always, generative AI is no more dangerous than institutions that have our data from their own processes or from third parties with whom we have transacted. When you work with generative AI, you must have these several major considerations when you prompt things. First of all, you should inform your patrons and be informed yourself about the data that is being collected and its purpose. They should know exactly what they're putting into the prompt and exactly what's going to happen to it as best as they can. And on that note, you should obtain explicit consent before collecting personal information. And they should give it if they're interacting with the AI tool. And thirdly, something that I have to conscientiously control myself with, limit data collection to what is essential. That's a process known as data minimization. Avoid explicit mention of private details. Avoid mentioning any generic factors of your life. Implement and enforce strict access and use controls. Have family members or friends or patrons or staff members or colleagues read over your prompts to make sure that they are private. Never assume that opting out will protect privacy, and never put individual people's attributes into your prompts or their prompts. Regarding confidentiality, ensure that staff and contractors are sure as to what data, if any, they can input into their prompts. One friend of mine is comfortable putting certain data into ChatGPT because that data is similar or identical to data for the entire field in which they work. Even if the AI can infer certain data points from what they put in, they can infer the same things for every similar entity that puts in those data points because it's public knowledge. It's data about, the soil. It's data about transportation patterns or transportation laws, publicly available information. And by that, I mean, government information, generally available weather or soil or other information like that is is a fair bet to put into an AI tool to analyze and to give you suggestions. But again, you should be very conscientious about this as well. Enforce a least privileged access model, and this means that you only use a model of a tool that has the least access. Human content moderation, have people read over your prompts, and again, anonymize the data that you put into prompts. So when I put this image into this PowerPoint, the AI-driven alt text generator said that it was a skeleton of a dinosaur, but in reality, it's a woolly rhinoceros. And this was a woolly rhinoceros fossil that was found by monks in 1700s, and they thought it was a unicorn. So they put it on display in their museum in their collection as a unicorn. And so our tool, our role is to ensure that we and our patrons don't make the Magdeburg unicorn of the AI era. Make sure that your material is well researched, accessible, follows all copyright regulations, and that it fulfills course learning outcomes. Would this resource or this product be good enough to meet my own expectations if I were looking for course materials or making something for my programming? Here are some recommendations for quality control. Use each AI tool for its intended purpose. Engage in best practices prompting, such as the CoStar framework. Ask the tool for its sources and try to make it give them to you. Find external resources that support the information given, preferably using the SIFT method, and analyze the output for ethical issues, accessibility, DEI, iterate, fact check, all the things that you would do for regular information resources. I'm on my last minute, so I'll hurry and go through the SIFT method, and this is stop, investigate the source, find better coverage, and trace claims to the original context. Again, basic information literacy things and processes that you would do for your own materials and for any websites you would look at. Here are the references. Again, there's that privacy document and Sean Falconer's article on Stack Overflow. here are various resources that I have made and things. The Art of Prompt Engineering with ChatGPT by Nathan Hunter is an excellent resource. I made some workflows, and again, of course, Ethan Wallach's LinkedIn profile, an excellent guide of person to follow. And thank you very much. And I'm very pleased to have presented and shared all these things with you today.
Wow, Reed. That was amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll get the recording up. Feel free to communicate directly with Reed through Library 2.0 if you would like. For other presentations, there are the discussion forums related to those presentations. We'll get the Reed, if you'll send me your slide deck, if you would like to share it, then I can put it up with your keynote recording, but it'll also be in the recording.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks everybody. What a great day. I'm going to close this out now. Take care. We'll have the recordings up by Monday. Bye now.